You're watching TVC Breakfast. Let's get into the next discussion now. South Africa has commenced a week of mourning for revered anti-apartheid campaigner Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Now, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate passed away on Sunday at the age of 90 in Cape Town. His funeral will be held on New Year's Day at St. George's Cathedral in his former Cape Town parish. Tutu's foundation has revealed this, although ceremonies are likely to be muted because of COVID-19 restrictions. Archbishop Desmond Tutu was one of the world's most loved human for many reasons. His peaceful activism against South Africa's apartheid government is one of them. As chair of the country's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, he showed the world resolution will be attained without violence. He devoted his life and time to celebrating and advancing human dignity, justice, and morality. That is the man we're talking about in the next couple of minutes. So joining me now via Zoom is Global Affairs Analyst Collins Nweke, joining us from Brussels. Collins, good morning. It's good to have you join me in compliment of the season.
I wish you the very best, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Right now, from the messages we are getting from across African countries and around the world, it is not just South Africa that is mourning the passing of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, but the entire continent and even parts of the world as well. For those who understand what the late Archbishop Emeritus stood for. But if we have to point out to some of his legacies, what do you think they are for those who really know him, for those who were, who understood what he stood for and all that he did to return South Africa from the clinches of apartheid regime?
I believe that the most consequential aspect of the life and times of Archbishop Desmond Tutu is the fact that he has taught the world how to be a force to be reckoned with outside politics. So in other words, that non-state activism using peaceful means is a very, very effective and virulent weapon in the struggle to get things changed, in the struggle to make this world a better place for everyone to live in. So he did that through his being very vocal, but he also stood on very, very strong principles that he never wavered from. And one of those principles is that of justice, equal opportunity for everyone, but more centrally is justice. Justice for the white, justice for the black, but also for the poor and for the rich, and more importantly, through a peaceful means. I believe that is the greatest thing that he will be remembered for as a legacy.
All right. Now, he chaired the Truth and Reconciliation Commission after the apartheid regime. And what do you think, or how do you think that commission chaired by him reconciled and created the new South Africa that we see today, where other African countries are even making reference to it and looking forward to seeing how they can emulate that in their contemporary society?
Underlying the notion of truth and reconciliation, as Desmond Tutu actually put it forth to South Africa and then eventually resonating to the rest of the world, is the fact that it is important for us to manage expectations. Now, his expectations out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa wasn't one that was too high, too ambitious. No, he simply felt that it is important for people to have a dialogue. Your enemy, you need to at some point sit down and speak with your enemy, because you have even if it's a very tiny chance that you will win the enemy over to you. But if you don't, at least the enemy knows where pains you, where he has hurt you, and perhaps there might be one or two areas where you have got the enemy as well. That was, you know, the basis of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And so, by people speaking out, they were able to, you know, come closer to one another. Of course, there were instances where people forgave others, and we.
All right, we seem to have lost the feed from Collins Nweke there, joining us from Brussels. We are talking about the man, the Archbishop Emeritus, Archbishop Desmond Tutu in South Africa, who passed on. He is seen as a global icon. He walked side by side with Nelson Mandela in returning South Africa to what it is, the glory of the country. And in simple terms, like Collins was saying earlier on, that we have all read, has to do with the humility and the simple approach to the issue of reconciliation, forgiveness, and mutual respect for each other, whether you're white or black or whatever the thing is. The issue of segregation, the issue of domination was kicked against, where he has led activism, very active activism against that regime at that time. But he did it in a very peaceful way, in very subtle ways that was so very instrumental to the dismantling of the apartheid regime in South Africa. And the country relied so much on his person as a moral compass and the guidance to the modern South Africa we have today, a reconciled South Africa that we have today, which has been a model. In fact, a lot of persons have used the Truth and Reconciliation Commission module that he chaired after the apartheid to recommend to other countries who have had different issues. Recall that in Nigeria, we've had the issue of the civil war that was fought between 1970, around 1970, yeah, that ended in 1970 rather. And a lot of people are saying that there still has to be that reconciliation. There still has to be that kind of discussions where people, old wounds are healed from the mind, and then everyone can come back to get on the same table, you know, moving forward as a united country. So these are the issues. And as it is, he passed away on Sunday, just a few days ago, and the country is having a 1 week mourning, has declared a 1 week mourning, national mourning, and he passed away at the age of 90. Of course, the world will miss Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu for all he stood for, his moral guidance, his leadership, his humility, and all of the principles that he stood for the country, for the continent, and even for the world. And a lot of people are looking forward to how he will be immortalized, how his legacies will keep going on to the next generations, so they can know the kind of person he is, and then also emulate his kind of person. He and Nelson Mandela and other African icons. We remember Julius Nyerere from Tanzania. We remember Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana. We also have Nnamdi Azikiwe from Nigeria, as well as Awolowo and Obafemi Awolowo, and the Sardauna of Sokoto, and a lot of these icons, Sam Nujoma of Namibia, and so many others, Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, and so on, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya. So these are all the people who are regarded and seen as the grandfathers of the continent, and Desmond Tutu is seen as one of the last, you know, living grandfathers of the continent. Now, Collins, it's good to have you back on. Before the line went off, the question I asked earlier was the impact of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which Archbishop Desmond Tutu chaired after the apartheid, and what impact it has on the modern South Africa that we had today. You were making that point before the line went off.
Indeed, and sorry for the technical hitch. Well, The point I was making essentially, Mike, is the fact that the expectations out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa wasn't very, very high. It was modest. Modest in the sense that the whole notion was for people who were aggrieved to sit down around the table and actually, you know, speak out what exactly the issues were, and then confront the devil before them, and then have a conversation, and after that conversation, you know, that you then have some relief. Now, let us not make any mistake about that. It was a very, very heavy exercise because, you know, one of the clips that was broadcast to the world was when Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu actually broke down. You know, that was the extent to which it was heavy. But in the end, the heart that was heavy before the exercise started actually lightened up for the vast majority of the people, both the victims and also the perpetrators. And I believe that it is something that the world learned some lessons from, because you could also see it play out in one form or the other in Rwanda. There are countries that are still waiting for those things to happen, countries where there have been war, and even the history of those wars are not taught up till today in those countries. I believe that they are waiting to take a coup from what happened within the you know, Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa. So it was a very, very important exercise masterminded by the late Desmond Tutu.
All right. Now, when we remember those whom the people call the grandfathers of the African continent, people like Nelson Mandela is there, people like Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Jomo Kenyatta, Kwame Nkrumah, Sam Nujoma of Namibia, people like Kenneth Kaunda, as well as Patrick Lumumba. Now, all of these people whom are seen as the grandfathers of the continent, Bishop Desmond Tutu, Archbishop, also included. Now, if you liken those people with the leaders we have now, how do you compare regarding the area of whether we are learning from the grandfathers and imbibing the African spirit and seeing how we can move the African continent forward in true leadership, in enterprise, and also in human capacity development? What are you seeing from that window?
In all of the great men that you have named, from Nnamdi Azikiwe to Kwame Nkrumah and Kenneth Kaunda and the rest of them, I believe that Desmond Tutu was in a genre of his own. Let's not forget the vast majority of you know, the icons, the African heroes that you have named, that actually gave us the you know, African continent as we see it today. Did all of those through political means. They belong to one political party or the other. But Desmond Tutu actually carried out his message and his work through the pulpit, based on his you know, religious faith, but also a high sense of spirituality. So that was something that marked him out. Now today, the dream of Pan-Africanism, of course, is far from the reality as you know, envisioned by the great African leaders. Now, there have been steps towards that direction, but of course, it's taking them a lot longer than they envisaged. Now, think of how the character of the leaders that we have today. It is a far cry from the characters of, you know, the likes of Patrice Lumumba, you know, Jomo Kenyatta, and of course the rest of them up across the continent. So yes, the politics of self-centeredness, of you know, selfishness, you know, high-handedness, and so on and so forth. Those are the things that dominate politics of today. And I believe that leaders should, well, up-and-coming leaders as a matter of fact, because to a very large extent, I believe that, you know, the world has lost faith on the current crop of African leaders. But the younger ones have a lesson to learn in a combination of the life of Desmond Tutu, who through non-state activism achieved very great heights, and then the selflessness of political figures like Lumumba, Mandela, and the rest of them. Yes, there are quite a lot to learn from them.
All right. Now, if you see the passing of Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, you see humility, contentment, you see principle, you see love, you see all of those virtues that everyone would imagine in their minds. And that was also reflected in some of the leaders that we are talking about, even including Nelson Mandela. Now, even the area of sacrifice and giving and generosity and so on. Now, how do we begin to imbibe these kind of total package, if I have to call it that way, because they are all different virtues that is difficult to see or find in one person, but finding all of these and even much more in very few persons like that. How do we begin to imbibe this on all of these in the younger generation of today on the African continent?
Well, in the first place, you talked about generosity. But I believe that the centerpiece of the generosity that Desmond Tutu actually stood for was more of the generosity of spirit in the first place. And I will explain that in a few words. Generosity of spirit actually implies that you give the other person on the other side always, at all times, not sometimes, at all times, the benefit of the doubt. So which means that where you need to exercise your discretion for the other person, your opponent, you do that with a very, very broad mind. And I believe that is very, very important. That selflessness, of course, is also a very, very important virtue. Now, finding them, all of those virtues, all of those values in one person, yes, is a tall order. But you see, we have been told, not just by close friends and allies of Desmond Tutu, but also his family, that what you saw publicly about him was what he was even in private. So he had this open persona that simply rests on his good-naturedness, on his personality, and so he could be himself anywhere, anytime. One example to where actually drive that point home is the fact that his campaign led to the fall of apartheid South Africa, and came ANC, the political party that he supported. Now, when they came to power and he saw that ANC began to do things outside what had been agreed and what was expected of South African government, he didn't, waste any second to call them out. He called them out, and actually, in the time of, the president, the one that was sent to prison recently, I'm trying to,
Jacob Zuma.
Jacob Zuma. Yeah. In the time of Jacob Zuma, he simply made it clear, sorry, I am not voting ANC anymore. Now, we have seen in other parts of the world, take for example, a similar thing happening in the United States, where the late Colin Powell, who is, a Republican, 2 times actually made it clear that he wasn't voting, Republicans, his party, and voted Barack Obama, and then later voted Joe Biden. So those are little pieces of examples of his life that actually, resonated with people outside South Africa, not even within Africa, and then, continue to, one can only see that they will continue to make wave in the coming year. So essentially, the life and times of Desmond Tutu is something that has to be taught in every school to our kids, because I believe that in his life and time, there are so much to learn on how to be the selfless leader that Africa needs going forward.
All right. Before I let you go, let's talk about the issue of how best to immortalize someone like Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, because the point there is a lot of people see him as even larger than just South Africa. He's bigger when it comes to his relevance to life and values on the African continent. How best do you think he can be immortalized?
Well, in the first place, I believe that a foundation in his name has been set up, and it is being chaired by a certain Swedish or Danish citizen. That is a very good start. I believe also that starting from the African continent, there is a need to have an institute of Desmond Tutu, where his legacy, not just in political activism, non-state activism, but also in the way he went about his faith, recognizing that his faith is not the be-all and end-all of religion, that his faith can live side by side other faiths, quite different from what we see in other religions as of today. So that whole notion of tolerance was something that he imbibed, and I believe that as Africa shifts towards Pan-Africanism, as has been enunciated by the founding fathers, the life and times of Desmond Tutu is one that has to actually feed into that Pan-Africanism that is being talked about. So, beginning from the African continent, like I said, an institute that actually is devoted to his life and time and work is a good way to start. And I believe that once a start is made in that direction, the rest of the world would key into it, because he was more.
All right. It's also a good place to leave it. I thank you so much, Collins Nweke, although we lost the audio there, but it's a good place to also end the conversation. The point was really made. Thank you very much for your time on the program.